For my thoughts, says God, are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, says the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. Well, let's pick on the women for a while. Ephesians 5:22. Wives, submit yourselves unto your own husbands as unto the Lord. There's that ugly, ugly word that we've tried to spiritualize, we've tried to rationalize, we've tried to say, well, it's a modern generation now. That was written by a man who had problems with women and etc., etc., etc. But no, the Word of God simply says, wives, submit yourselves unto your own husbands. Goes on to say in verse 23, for the husband is the head of the wife. We'll have a look at that a bit later. 1 Peter 3:1. Back to the Peter references. 1 Peter 3:1 says, likewise ye wives, be in subjection to your own husbands. This isn't Paul speaking now, this is Peter saying the same thing as Paul said. Be in subjection to your own husbands, that if any obey not the word, they also may without the word be won by the conversation of the wives. You know what I see in that verse? That this business about being in subjection and submitted to your husband applies even if the husband isn't a Christian. I mean, that's exactly what it's obviously saying. Be in subjection to your own husbands, that even if any of them obey not the word, they also may without the word be won by the lifestyle or the conversation of the wife. So here we're seeing that wives have an obligation or a responsibility to be in subjection or submission to their husband, whether the husband is a Christian or not. I've had people say when I've been discussing this, oh yes, but that submission and love stuff, that's for Christian couples. I said, no, it's for marriage. It works for marriage, Christian or not. You can't say, I'm not a Christian, so I deserve a different deal. There's only one deal that works, and this is the one that God's given us in the Word. Nothing else actually works. In Colossians 3:18, the women actually have a pretty easy deal, you know, because they've got less to think about. The men have got to go through giving honour, and they've got to be not bitter and so on, but all the wives keep getting told over and over again is just simply to submit. So it's the same message. Colossians 3:18 says that. Wives, submit yourselves unto your own husbands as it is fit in the Lord. End of story. There's no, they don't have to worry about the bitterness. They don't have to fight with all those other things. They don't even love the husband. Isn't that amazing? The wife is not asked to love the husband. Now, there is reference about the older women teaching the young women how to love their husbands, but in the actual mandatory instructions about husbands and wives don't even have to love their husband. A woman says, oh, I hate you. And you say, well, that's fair enough. I don't mind, still works. Our marriage will still work. You don't have to love me for our marriage to work. I have to love you, but you don't have to love me for our marriage to work. Now, if the wife hates him, I'll tell you what, that's a real challenge. I'm not trying to suggest that it isn't, but I just wanted to make that distinction for you. Now, let's have a look at God's pattern. I want to make this radical statement, and it's such a dumb statement, but you would be surprised how hard it is for some people to believe it. So listen carefully to this radical, dumb statement. God designed marriage to work. Now let me say it again, because it really is that serious. God designed marriage to work. You would believe, if you looked at the divorce statistics today, that marriage doesn't work. You'd believe, if you read certain of the magazines that are trying to manipulate our social values, that marriage has been a dead loss for 3 generations. You would believe, if you listen to some of the people that are speaking on different subjects around the place and pushing their different bandwagons, that marriage never worked, even in the first place, that it was only a means of male oppression or all sorts of other things. But I want to tell you something. God designed marriage, it was his invention, and when he designed it from day one, it was designed to work. And it still works. Marriage still works. Despite all of the people who have opted out of marriage or have tried all sorts of alternatives, God's design still works. And it's still beautiful and very, very precious. Marriage is a working model. It's not a theoretical model, it's something that really, really works. One key ingredient that makes marriage work is commitment. Commitment. I mean, really, if you really want to boil it all down, that's exactly what marriage is. You had to try and distill marriage down into the smallest possible ingredient. It's a commitment. It's the fact that I said to Susan, I commit myself to be your husband, and she said, Chris, I'll commit myself to be your wife. And we went into a church building. We had stained glass windows and all that sort of stuff. We said all the vows in the good old English. We had a photographer there to prove that we were there, and we said it. We exchanged rings as a physical token of sleek, white limo, which was the one that her girlfriend had used, and she really wanted it, and she's just been in the office and they've told her that it's booked up on the date of her wedding and she will not be able to use that limo. However, they have lots of other ones that aren't as expensive and aren't as attractive as that one. And she's standing there with her feet on the gravel and looking at this car with tears running down her face. And this voice from behind says, "It don't make no difference, you know." And she turns around and wipes away the tears to find that the man that polishes the cars has been watching her for a while. And she says, "What? I beg your pardon?" He says, "It don't make no difference, you know." He said, "I've seen him get hitched in Model T Fords and in expensive cars and in horse and cart. I've driven for the wealthy and I've driven for the poor. I've seen him leave in helicopters and I've seen him turn up walking. It don't make no difference how you get there or how you leave. It don't make no difference." And it's true. Those things have absolutely no bearing on the success of the marriage. Some friends of Susan's were married. One of her girlfriends got married and we went to their engagement party. We knew the couple. Susan knew the girl extremely well, had known her for many years. And I didn't like the look of the guy that she was going to marry one bit. Very likeable guy, but a lousy prospect for a husband. Sort of guy you were sure was playing the field all the time. Anyway, he was her choice, so what was there to say? They got married. Turned out that they had a unit that was already bought for them or whatever, and they were well set. Both a very attractive couple, good jobs, good money, everything was going well for them, and it lasted about 3 months or thereabouts. And Susan and I weren't the slightest bit surprised when we found out it didn't work, because we didn't think it was going to work in the first place, because there was no commitment. Oh, there was money. Oh, there was apparent compatibility. Oh, there was charming personality, but there was no commitment. And I think that there are women that would look at their husband and think, "You're a very plain man, and you haven't made me much money, and you're a boring old thing, and you snore, and your breath stinks in the morning, and you pick your toenails. I can't stand people who pick their toenails. I could have a younger man, a more handsome man, a richer man, a doctor maybe, or somebody who made real money, but you're committed to me." And that woman could ditch that man and go off with someone that might have had a whole lot more personality, had a whole lot more going for it, and not have had a marriage at all. It's amazing how valuable that commitment is. That's what makes the marriage, is the commitment. And I tell you what, there's no relationship that is going to be immune to bumps. I mean, that's just the way it is. Life is not immune to bumps. Jesus said so. Now let me tell you, Jesus said so. He said there was a foolish man that built his house upon the sand, and the rains descended, and the floods came, and the house collapsed. He said that then there was a wise man who built his house upon the rock, and the rains came, and the floods came, and they beat upon the door of that house, and the house stood firm. It doesn't matter whether you're an idiot or whether you're a most astute and God-fearing person, the rain is going to come, the storms are going to come, and the waves are going to beat upon the door of the house. So it doesn't matter that you happen to have married the daughter of an apostle. It doesn't matter that she can trace her lineage back to Peter. It doesn't matter that she prophesies for breakfast and fasts 6 weeks out of 7. It doesn't matter that he happens to be heir to the papacy. It matters whether you are committed to each other. And that commitment, it doesn't matter what standing you've got spiritually, you are going to have storms come against your life. And so you've got to have commitment to see you through those storms. And those storms can be terribly devastating. Couples that had no idea that one of their children was going to be injured at birth and end up in their care for a whole lot longer than they wanted. had no idea that one or other of them was going to take ill and not be as well as they ever wanted. No idea that the finances were going to turn out the way they were going to turn out. That's why we have to get people to say at the altar, for better or for worse, because we all expect better. But everyone that's had a worse deal, none of them really expected it. You go up to them and say, how many of you expected to lose your leg in that bus accident? Oh yes, I expected it. I knew within 3 years I'd have lost my leg. Rubbish. Nobody knows that stuff. What is it? When we say for better or for worse, we're talking about commitment. I just want to make some comment here about the fact that the modern idea of commitment is a contract. And if you want to hear more about this, the tape series from last year was very well elaborated on, but allow me to say this. Most people today think of marriage as a contract. And they'll even talk in terms of a 50-50 deal. Well, I think that if she's prepared to do the cooking and the housework, I should be prepared to do a certain amount around the house. If he's prepared to do this and that, I can't see why. Well, we can come to a pretty good arrangement. I'm sure, and we want to be fair about this. My reaction to that is reasonably cynical. And one couple said to me, I said, what sort of wedding are you wanting? And they said, with the most demure smiles and the blinking of the eyes and the sweet looks at each other, oh, we believe in a 50-50 wedding. And I said, oh dear, do you? I said, wouldn't you rather that he was 100% husband and she was 100% wife? Oh, well, that's what we mean. And I said, well, that's not what you said. I'd rather have a 100-100 relationship than a 50-50 relationship. So my job is to be husband 100%. If that means that the deal in our home is terribly biased against me, then so be it. If it means I get to do all the hard work and all the dirty work and all the chores, and Susan gets to sit around and powder her nose and read books, which she doesn't get to do, just for the record. In case she ever listens to the tape. If it ever worked out like that, then so be it. It's not my, well, I put the bin out last week, it's your turn this week. Well, then I cooked tea last night, you cooked tea tonight. Well, it's your turn to look after the baby. I got up at 4 o'clock last night, I didn't get any sleep, you get up and do it this time. That's what 50-50 deals come to. They're a contract. I don't believe in 50-50 deals. I don't believe in sitting down and saying, well now, let's get it all worked out. Who's going to take out the bin? Who gets to feed the cat? Well, it's your canary, so I'm not taking any responsibility for that. Now, it's what we do with my car and your car. Which one will go in the garage and which one will go on the street? And, I mean, you've got to have some of those things clarified. I'm not trying to suggest that you don't, but I'm trying to suggest that the real ideal is where we say to God, God, I'm going to be a husband. Lord, I want to be 102% husband. So show me how I can do that. And where the wife says, God, I'm going to have in the 2 weeks' time the responsibility of being a wife from that moment on for the rest of my life. I want to be absolutely the most perfect, most complete wife there can be. Show me what that means and teach me how to be 100% wife. And then follow God's pattern. Man's pattern is a contract. There's some people who I pointed out before, they talk about a contract. What they're actually interested in is a contract. A con. Oh yes, darling, I think you're wonderful. I love you very, very much. We'll be so happy together. I can't wait to get my hands on your money. Well, it may not be the money, although I've had people that I've had to help, and that was exactly why he married her or she married him. Sometimes it can be to get territorial rights to below the navel. That's the real motivation. I know that sounds coarse, but there are some people, that's the only reason they're prepared to really go that far. Okay, we'll get married. They're not looking at what God has for them. They're actually into a con. And you know how to tell if it's a con? He actually dresses better when he's going out with her than he does normally. Actually cleans his teeth, would you believe? Polishes his shoes. Puts on his best face. Why? Well, he wants to impress her. Of course he does. Why is he trying to impress her? Well, because he wants to win her affections. But you all know, don't you? That 2 weeks, maybe even 24 hours after the wedding ceremony is all over, off with all of the care, off with all of the effort, he's back to being the louse that he's always been. It's called a con. It's called a con. And it's serious. Actually, any contract is a con, because you're cheating the person of what they really should have. What they should have is covenant relationship. A covenant is a deal set between two people that lasts for the rest of your life and nothing can break it. And as I said before, it's covered very well in the tape series from the last time. Covenant relationship seen in Scripture is the description of what marriage is really all about. And God sees marriage as a covenant and nothing less than a covenant. If you enter into a contract with somebody, then you are entering into a con. I wanted to show you a couple of verses. Turn across to Malachi, the last book in the Old Testament, and have a look at chapter 2 and verse 14. In Malachi, we have a situation where this prophet called Malachi is being used by God to challenge the people about their unfaithfulness. In Malachi chapter 2 and verse 14, we have these words. Yet you say, or verse 13, and this have you done again, covering the altar of the Lord with tears, with weeping and with crying out, insomuch that he regards not the offering any more, or receives it with good will at your hand. Yet you say, why? Because the Lord has been witness between you and the wife of your youth, against whom you have dealt treacherously. Yet is she thy companion and the wife of thy covenant. So these people had married wives. They had then been unfaithful to those wives. And God was judging them and saying, as far as I'm concerned, you still only have one wife, and it's the one whom you married when you were young, the first one you were married to, because a covenant was established between you two. And you've dealt treacherously against her. But she is the one whom I regard to be the wife of your covenant. In one situation, God actually told the men of Israel, those foreign wives that you've married, I do not honour those marriages. I do not consider them to be legitimate marriages. Even though you've gone to the altar and put on the rite ceremony, ditch those women and go back to the wives with whom you originally established covenant. God sees our relationship in marriage as covenant, meaning it lasts for the whole of our life. Proverbs chapter 2, would you please? Verses 16 and 17. To deliver you from the strange woman, even from the stranger which flatters with her words, which forsakes the guide of her youth, and forgets the covenant of her God. A woman who is prepared to prostitute herself and work the streets and leave behind the husband to whom she has covenant relationship. Now, I don't know what word that's translating out to be in the Bible you're using. But make a note of those verses and check them in a number of different scriptures. A covenant is being established. Do you know that in establishing a covenant in the Old Testament, they used to take an animal and they'd cut it down the middle. And they'd lay the two halves out and they'd have a pathway between the two. And the parties to the covenant would walk between it. And that's why when we have a wedding ceremony, we sit the husband's family on one side and the wife's family on the other, and we make them both walk down the aisle. She walks down first and they walk back down together when the covenant has been sealed. So there's a lot of significance about some of those things we don't pay any attention to much these days. We're talking about a covenant relationship being established. Covenant relationship. Now, some distinctions between a contract and a covenant. A covenant is based on trust between the parties. A contract is based on distrust. You only negotiate how it's going to work out if you think they might be likely to cheat you. If you had complete trust in them, you wouldn't worry about whether you ended up doing 80% of the work or not. So as soon as you say, well, darling, we better get this all sorted out, that immediately says, I distrust you. Isn't that a lovely, lovely thing to say to your partner? A covenant is based on unlimited responsibility. Once I'm in covenant with somebody, it doesn't matter whether both my legs get broken, whether wild Indians attack, whatever happens, nothing can break that covenant. The situation is one of unlimited responsibility. If I have to go all the way to South America to save my wife, then I have no alternative but to do that. If it costs me every cent that I have no alternative. The covenant is unlimited in its implications and its responsibility. A contract is based on limited liability. That's the very notion, limited liability is built into that contract. So that we know that there's only so much that we can lose through a contractual deal. A covenant cannot be broken if new circumstances occur, but a contract can be voided by mutual consent or by a complete change in circumstances. I can say to Susan, imagine, or a man saying to his wife, I know we stood at the altar yesterday and we made wonderful vows to each other and we established a covenant, but I had no idea that on the way out of the reception centre we'd be hit by that truck and you'd be a quadriplegic for the rest of your life. Now fair's fair. I mean, we haven't even been to bed together. Fair's fair. I know I cut a covenant with you. I know I established a covenant with you. But the circumstances have changed somewhat now. I'm wondering if we could come to a different deal. No. Covenant is unable to be changed when different circumstances occur. Boy, that's marriage. You get people that will understand commitment and covenant, and you've got yourself a marriage on your hands. The reason why marriages don't work today is not because marriage doesn't work, but because people are so selfish that they're only interested in themselves and they want to cut contracts and establish cons. They don't want to enter into what God has established for them.